Anthony was at a loss as to why his son Mike was returning home hungry each and every day. He always carried a lunchbox with him when they sent him to school, and it ought to have had enough food to keep the little child fed. Welcome to USA Stories channel. Do not forget to subscribe and activate the bell button to receive all new updates. Now let's go to the story. To exacerbate the situation, little Mike appeared afraid when his parents asked him about it. Anthony chose to ask the school if they knew what was going on since he was concerned about the circumstances. However, the principal was equally ignorant of the situation as Anthony was. They changed their strategy and asked Mike's classmates, but they were informed by the other pupils that Mike never brought lunch from home. Anthony was really startled to learn this. The fact that Mike's family wasn't wealthy and the other pupils assumed he didn't have food perplexed him. Mike started weeping when he was called out of class and asked about the meal, which only made his parents feel worse. However, he provided no information. The clue was revealed to them by the instructor who entered after them. She reported to the principal and Anthony about a new substitute teacher who was acting strangely around Mike. Clive, the replacement teacher, was summoned into the principal's office right away. Clive's expression altered as he saw Anthony seated. When the principal brought up Mike and his circumstances, Clive said he didn't know what they were talking about. Anthony granted the principal's request to talk with Clive in private. However, his misgivings about Clive were validated when a different instructor, who had entered the room to console Anthony, informed him that she believed Clive was plotting. Anthony knew he had to take immediate action, but things didn't work out the way he had anticipated. The mood had changed when Anthony was called back into the principal's office. Anthony was told by the principal that there was nothing he could do about the problem because there was no proof. Their hands were constrained since Mike would not tell them what was going on and Clive would not admit to knowing anything. The two decided that if they wanted the situation to end, they would need to come up with a fresh strategy. Things appeared to worsen throughout the course of the following several days. Mike made it appear as though Anthony's visit to the principal made things worse by refusing to speak with his parents. Anthony thought it would be better to handle things on his own because he could no longer wait. He drove to the school the very following day and faced Clive. He felt more worse than he had before he went to the school, full with worry for his son. Anthony had an amazing idea when he arrived home. He typed Clive's entire name into Google in the hopes of finding any information. He was shocked to see that the individual was only mentioned on one web page. Prior to joining Mike's school, he had worked at this elementary school. The school's website had Clive listed as one of its teachers, but it also stated that he was no longer employed there. He made the decision to give the school a call to find out more, but after receiving the information, his worries skyrocketed. Anthony was aware that something odd was undoubtedly happening, and it was all related to his son's instructor. For what reason was his kid hiding things from him? He knew the teacher had something to do with his lunch disappearing every day. For the sake of his son, he felt he had to come up with a rapid solution. That's when Anthony started thinking of a strategy. He began by talking to the principal. Perhaps he might still be of use. Anthony planned to bring his concerns to the attention of the school's top official. He knew that something may come of it all if he at least informed the principal of the circumstances. Even though his assistant informed Anthony that he required an appointment, Anthony nonetheless entered the principal's office. He astonished the principal when he approached him while seated in his chair. Anthony greeted the principal before she could say anything. "Hello, I'm sure you know me. My name is Michael's dad. Regarding a teacher, I have some grievances." Anthony told the principal everything he thought may be wrong. He shook his head after giving off a worried face. Obviously, there was a problem. "I'm sorry," the principal responded, giving Anthony a hard look. "Without any proof, there isn't much I can do." But Anthony could feel his blood pressure rising. Could he truly take no action? Anthony left the workplace in a hurry and without anything. The principal refused to change his demand for proof. He came to the conclusion that he would need to act alone. As Anthony headed home, he was furious, but his mind was already working up a strategy. Though he was aware of the extreme danger, he understood exactly what would benefit his son. Anthony was prepared to move through with his plan the next day. he placed a little item inside the front pouch of his son's backpack while he was getting ready for school. After his kid down the stairs and finished his meal, the two of them departed for school. Anthony sent him on his way, grinning to himself at his cunning. At last, the teacher's secret would be revealed. Anthony had hidden a camera in his son's rucksack. He would have the ability to capture every exchange between his son and the instructor on camera. He dropped him off and headed for work. Anthony's only option while at work was to wait. His employer even questioned him about why he was smiling the entire time. But the reason was because he knew the instructor would soon be pleading with him for forgiveness. When Anthony picked up Mike from school later that day, he skillfully removed the recorder from the backpack. He inquired about his son's day, but his expression was dejected once more. Anthony realized then that he was acting appropriately. After getting the recorder out and playing it again, he realized what needed to be done after hearing his son's and teacher's interaction. Anthony scheduled a meeting for the next day by giving the principal a call. He clarified that he has the proof that would completely unravel the case. Anthony only needed to bide his time till that encounter. He would make sure that the teacher's secret was out, and he was now as arrogant as ever. In the end, his kid would beg him not to, but how could he be a good father if he didn't shield his son? Anthony sat in the principal's office with Mike the next day after school. The teacher, Clive, also arrived after a 5-minute delay. It appeared as though he was unaware of what was about to happen. Anthony posed the crucial question, "Should I play the recording for you, principal?" with a satisfied smile. After obtaining authorization, Anthony began playing the tape. He heard his voice on the recording and saw the teacher become pale. He could tell that his face was completely devoid of blood. At last, he would receive his just desserts for the harm he had caused to his kid. He simply sat back in contentment after that. Everyone was shocked by what they heard. They heard Mike hand Clive his lunch, but they also heard him go up to another youngster. After that, Clive gave the other youngster the food. Mike gave the principal an explanation of what was happening after a brief period of bewilderment. But the ultimate twist, that would be. At last, Mike revealed to the class the truth. He worked with his instructor to provide one of his students with lunch each day. This occurred as a result of the child's inability to pay for his own meal. Clive was pleased with Mike for giving up his lunch in this situation in order to help a less fortunate student. Mike was ashamed and didn't want anybody to find out. Anthony made 2 sandwiches for his kid. After adopting 2 children, a mother learns their true identities after several months. A Colorado single mother adopted 2 kids, but she eventually learned the true identities of the kids after many months. How will this impact her? Like other women, she was already in her 30s and desired a family, but she didn't think she would be able to fulfill her dream at that point. After the divorce, she was going through a trying time in her life and wasn't sure what to do next. Nevertheless, she remained determined to realize her ambition. Katie relocated from Alabama to Colorado in order to start over, taking a position in the commercial sector. She also purchased a home that required remodeling, but she intended to handle the work herself. Even though the makeover would be expensive, she felt confident in her choice. There were in fact 4 rooms in the home, and Katie lived alone. She felt as though something was lacking in her life as a result of this. She was taking her time so she could make the best choice, even though she knew she could do something about her circumstances. She was pretty busy repairing her house in her spare time, but it didn't provide her with the fulfillment she was seeking. She'd believed that getting a new career and purchasing a home would give her bravery and a fresh perspective on life, but none of that had been sufficient. Even though she had always desired children, she struggled with infertility. She was searching for alternative opportunities to become a mother because she was already in her 30s. This gave her the notion to register as a foster mother and contact child shelters. She wanted to adopt a child of her own since she loved them so much. She felt a bit uneasy about the concept, but she was also warm to the thought that it may work. She firmly believed that this was her vocation. This is the adventure Katie decided to take on Mother's Day. She felt pleased about filling out the applications to become a foster parent. This was the action that would alter her life irrevocably. With her arms wide open for whatever could come next, Katie knew she had made the correct decision. Foster children began to stream in shortly after that. Not only were they abandoned kids, but they had also experienced trauma in the past. Katie was always willing to help the kids after hearing their experiences. She was already caring for 4 children inside the year. The need to adopt a kid grew even more intense. She wanted more, even though she adored being a foster parent. She also aspired to be a mother for life. The time it took for her to fulfill her goal wasn't even that lengthy. She informed the organization of her desire to adopt, and she received a call in less than 2 weeks. That was over quickly. She received a call regarding a toddler who had been left behind by his biological mother at a neighboring hospital. Even though the baby was only 4 days old, Katie knew she wanted this child. That night, before she went to bed, she prayed hard to God for the opportunity to become that child's mother. Katie was holding the baby in her arms just a day after receiving the call. This infant was significantly younger than the 14-day-old she had previously cared for. That didn't matter though. She was ready to assist him if he needed it. The baby's abandonment made her very upset, but that wasn't the worst of it. After a few tests, the physicians discovered that the baby had medicines in his system. But Katie was glad to learn that these pills would not affect him in the long run. Katie gave this kid a very adorable name since she was totally devoted to him. Grayson is the name she gave him. Her favorite boy's name was Grayson. It was impossible for Katie to convey the connection she felt with Grayson. He felt like her own child since she loved him so much. Unbeknownst to her, Katie has exceptional parenting skills. This gave her even greater inspiration to adopt Grayson. She was instantly ready for anything. She raised Grayson to the best of her ability since he had a particular place in her heart. The charity continued searching for the baby's biological parents in the meantime, but they were unable to be located. At the age of 11 months, Grayson was formally adopted by Katie. Katie had anticipated a happy life with her kid. Because of the medicines in his system, Grayson required a lot of care, and Katie was there for him at all times. However, she continued to feel incomplete, so she chose to adopt a second child when Grayson was 18 months old. Although she desired a larger family, she continued to see to it that her kid got the medical attention he needed in the interim. A month after adopting Grayson, she received a second call, proving that she had adequate space in the home for a larger family. She had no idea that this call would permanently alter her and Grayson's life. In the same hospital where Grayson had been abandoned as a newborn, there was another infant. It was a girl named Hannah this time. Katie knew right away that she had to assist this infant as well. Like Grayson, Hannah had drug residues in her system as well. How ironic that. While Katie was aware that Hannah needed her assistance, her son was on her mind as well. That day, she made many calls, but her instinct kept urging her to assist Hannah. She also took in Hannah in this way because it was such an odd sensation that she was unable to control. She discovered that Hannah's birth mother shared the same name as Grayson's as she took Hannah into her arms. Is this really a coincidence? Examining the records, she discovered that in addition to sharing the same name and birth date, Hannah also had some of Grayson's medical traits. Is it possible that their mothers were the same? Despite their dissimilar appearances, Katie had a suspicion that the kids may be connected. Katie realized there was more to this story, but since Grayson had a different father, it would be challenging to learn the whole truth. This time, Katie made the initiative to find her children's biological mother. When she finally made contact with Hannah's original mother after months of seeking, she understood right away that this was also Grayson's mother. However, how is this even possible? This kind of event seldom ever occurs. She learned the true identities of the youngsters throughout the chat. She was informed about Grayson by her original mother, who had dropped her off at the hospital. Additionally, Katie saw that Grayson resembled her in several ways. Following the meeting, Katie sent all of the information she had on the woman and her kids to the charity. The children's relationship was becoming increasingly apparent, but only a blood test could definitively establish it. As it turned out, the DNA test results showed that Grayson and Hannah shared the same mother. They were sibling and sister. The fact that Katie has managed to bring these two kids under one roof astounds her beyond belief. Was it more fate-like, or was it truly fate? And your thoughts? Katie was really amazed by her good fortune and contentment. She would never have realized that Grayson had a sister if she hadn't taken Hannah in, and Hannah would have ended up living with a different family. Luckily, she continued hearing from her instincts to assist Hannah. This was a major miracle in Katie's life, and she was ecstatic to learn the true identities of the kids. Her desire was for them to be together since that was what was best for them. It wasn't by accident that they had been brought together. She was fast to intervene to save them from being divided since she didn't want them to be separated. She saw how happy the kids made each other, and she had already fallen in love with Hannah. The next action she needed to do was obvious. Soon after, she became formally the mother of both Hannah and her adoptive child. This was excellent. At last, Katie felt whole and was unable to put her excitement and happiness into words. Katie had always dreamed of becoming a mother, but when she began her journey as a foster parent, she had no idea that something so exquisite and extraordinary had already been waiting for her. Though she wasn't sure how things would transpire, she was confident that she could fulfill her ambition. Hannah seemed to have always been a part of Grayson and her life, fitting right in. At first, Katie was thrilled to assist Grayson, but it didn't seem to be enough. Although the adoption of Hannah and Grayson ended their foster relationship, Katie's life was far from over. She felt that God was using her to bring the two children back together. Katie was a natural mother and enjoyed raising these children, but the adoption did not mark the end of her journey as a foster parent. When Hannah was 13 months old, she received another unexpected phone call concerning Grayson and Hannah's biological mother. All of these questions were racing through Katie's mind. What was wrong with her? Did she want her kids back? Fortunately, there was good news to report. The biological mother had given birth to another boy. Although Katie had not intended to have a third child, she could not rule out having one either, so she took some time to consider her options and ultimately decided to adopt Jackson. Like Hannah, Jackson was the ideal addition to the family, and the three of them are now growing up in a loving home. However, the foursome has now grown to 5 members. Katie has been seeing a man who assists her with the kids for more than a year. She just launched a business on top of her hectic life with her family, career, and other commitments. Now that she has all she needs in life, she is looking to employ a babysitter. Please remember to subscribe to our channel, give us a thumbs up, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our videos. John was a loving husband and father who had a cozy existence in a small suburban town. His loving family, consisting of his wife Mary and their 2 kids, Tim and Sarah, added to his prosperous business career. The eldest, Tim, was a bright and driven young man who was about to begin his first job after graduating from college. John got a call one fateful night that would alter the course of his life. The message that the police brought to him was that Tim had died in a horrible accident. The revelation shocked John and his family, who found it difficult to accept their loss. John was devastated. He was unable to come to terms with his son's passing. He was overcome with anguish and a strong yearning for answers, feeling as though a piece of himself had been torn away. He couldn't get rid of the idea that Tim's death had a deeper meaning that he wasn't being told. John pored over the police files and witness accounts for hours on end, attempting to piece together what had happened, but he was unable to come up with any explanations. He started to experience an endless loop of sadness and hopelessness, making him feel as though he was going insane. John, who was desperate for closure, came up with the peculiar plan to put a camera inside Tim's casket and keep an eye out for any odd movement or possible indications of life. John persisted with his idea in spite of his family's and friends' initial skepticism and concerns, motivated by his frantic desire for answers. He was filled with anxiety and shame as he started making plans for the camera installation. Was he taking his search for answers a bit too far? Would he come to regret his choice? He was troubled by these ideas as he thought through the effects of his strategy. John started to get consumed by his fixation with learning the truth about Tim's death. The notion that his son's death was not the result of a random accident persisted in his mind. In an attempt to understand what had transpired, he pored over the police files and witness testimony for several hours. He searched everywhere, but he was unable to locate any answers. He was trapped in a never-ending loop of sadness and hopelessness, and felt as though he was going insane. His son was alive, but imprisoned in a chilly, dark dungeon, and he started to have nightmares about it. He was crying for assistance, but no one could hear him since he couldn't get to him. Every night, he woke up feeling dejected and covered in perspiration. He didn't know how to achieve closure, but he knew he had to. John saw a video of a man who had placed a camera inside the coffin of a loved one day while online cruising. The individual said that he had videotaped his deceased loved one moving and speaking to him. Though John was dubious, the concept took root in his thoughts. The idea that there could be a method to get in touch with his son persisted in his mind. John started looking into the concept and searching the internet for details. He watched many movies and read innumerable articles. They all seemed to confirm the theory that communication with the dead was feasible. This, he felt certain, was the solution he had been searching for. John was aware that his proposal was unconventional and that his friends and family would probably regard him as insane. But he couldn't get rid of the sense that this was the only way to have closure. He needed to know that Tim was at peace, and that during his last minutes he had not been alone. He couldn't get rid of the idea that Tim's death had a deeper meaning that he wasn't being told. At whatever cost, he was going to find out what it was. For several days, John had been watching the video that he had placed in Tim's casket, but he had not seen anything unusual. If his sadness had affected his judgment, he was starting to question whether he had made a mistake. But then, an unexpected event occurred on the fourth night. Tim's corpse was shown on the video abruptly shifting inside the casket, and his limbs and legs jerked like he was attempting to escape. John witnessed something that astounded him. His sight shocked him beyond belief. He watched the video several times over, growing more and more certain that what he was witnessing was genuine. He had conflicting feelings. A part of him was happy that Tim had survived the accident and was not dead, but another part of him felt overwhelmed and afraid. His relatives and friends were dubious when he promptly showed them the video. They dismissed it as a camera bug or a trick of the light, but John was certain that what he saw indicated Tim's continued survival. John called the police right away and showed them the video. After being startled, they started looking into the situation. As soon as they dug out Tim's body from the grave, they discovered that he was still breathing. They discovered that he was still breathing inside the casket. The revelation perplexed the physicians. How Tim could have survived inside the casket for so long was beyond their comprehension. They sent him to the hospital right away and performed every test they could to figure out what had occurred. They discovered that Tim's uncommon medical condition had left him in a profound coma. When John learned that his kid was safe and alive, he was ecstatic. He experienced a hitherto unexperienced feeling of relief and thankfulness. His friends and family were equally ecstatic and in disbelief at the news. They were appreciative of the second opportunity to see Tim again. People all throughout the world were moved by the story of John and Tim because it touched on themes of love, hope, and tenacity. John never wavered in his resolve to uncover the truth and never gave up on his son, even while everyone else thought Tim had passed away. The amazing news of Tim's survival provided John and his family with a priceless second opportunity for a happy reunion. After making a full recovery, Tim was incredibly grateful and began to appreciate every day of his restored health, never taking anything for granted. Now that he was back in his family's lap, Tim was thankful for his second opportunity at life and savored every second of it. The man had been waiting for 20 minutes patiently. There was a steady, low rumbling. It continued to bang on the back of his seat. It was obvious that the noise would not go away soon. As Mark and Laura sat on the plane from Florida to New Jersey, a spark of excitement shone in their eyes. The 2-hour journey barely registered as a blip on their itinerary. The sun was low in the sky as we flew. Excitement was in the air as everyone enjoyed a much-needed holiday. Luckily, the pair was able to reserve seats together. Everyone on the full flight was excited to get to their destination, but things did not turn out as expected. There was a rowdy kid seated behind them, which made the ride difficult. This fidgety toddler, a ball of energy hardly confined within the confines of the seatbelt, spoke loudly and kicked Mark's seat non-stop, causing continuous disturbances. Mark, who was notorious for having a short fuse, was not going to allow a child to spoil his flight. He had limitless energy and showed little self-control. Mark looked down, clearing his throat. "Would it be possible for you to ask your child to stop kicking my seat?" he said. She shot back, "He's just a kid, let him have fun," with dismissiveness. Mark was surprised by the response and amazed. Laura attempted to defuse the situation with a compassionate smile. Mark cast a bewildered expression, not feeling that he had an option. Brenda, the mother, had the option to beg him to stop, but she chose not to for whatever reason. Mark was offended by it. Minutes became hours, and the stress aboard the plane increased. As the struggle for control played out in the rows in front of them, passengers moved in their seats and exchanged sly looks. "Listen, champ," he said, his tone becoming a little more urgent. "It is imperative that you cease kicking the seat as we are going to land. Could you just give it a break and assist us all?" The child's eyes flickered, torn between the seriousness of the situation and the temptation of defiance. There was an expectant silence in the cabin while Alex considered his options. Brenda got up from her chair, tossing down her magazine. She cried out, "How dare you speak to my son?" Despite being taken aback, Mark didn't give up. "Pardon me," Mark remarked in a kind tone. "Could you please ask your child to stop kicking my seat?" Brenda narrowed her eyes and looked up. She shot back, "Mind your own business," going back to her book as though he didn't exist at all. By now, the other passengers had become aware of the disturbance. Everyone was bothered by the noise Alex was producing, but no one else did anything about it except to capture it on their phones. With the assistance of another pilot, Mark went on. After a few fruitless tries to find comfort, Mark turned around again, growing impatient. He may be kind if he made an effort to make friends with the youngster. "Hey, friend, could you just take a seat over here? It would be much appreciated." The impolite woman shook her head at them and narrowed her eyes at the pair. "Pardon me, but how many times must I remind you to leave my son alone? I'll file a harassment report against you." It was enough for Laura. "Please keep your youngster under control," she urged as she turned around. "You're being really impolitely toward us. We politely requested you several times." The mother was flushed. She was prepared for battle, and no one was permitted to talk to her or her kid in that way. "Alex, sweetheart, enjoy yourself to the fullest. Everyone is aware of how dull traveling as a child can be." Mark had reached his breaking point. He carried on a carry-on bag with stuff for just such an occasion. Once he showed them what was in store for them, the small boy and his mother would stop laughing. By now, he'd tried approaching him several times, and the youngster had learned to ignore him. However, things were different this time. He held up his hand to show the youngster what he had, then put a finger to his lips. As soon as the youngster saw what Mark was holding in his hand, he sat still. Now that he realized what Mark was up to, he stopped kicking his chair. Mark motioned to the child to be silent. The child gave a nod of agreement and continued to keep his gaze on the thing that Mark was holding. Inside, Mark faced ahead once more. Now he waited to see if the child would honor his word. What had he handed him, though? The gift he'd given the youngster was particularly meaningful. It was Belgian chocolate, Mark's favorite confection. He could hear the child in behind of him gorging on the chocolate and the wrapper. The child didn't disturb Mark at all while he was eating the sweets. He even came close to falling asleep at one point. Now that he was free of the vibrations coming from behind, he was overcome with a sense of serenity and quiet. However, it resumed, and Mark's eyes widened. The kicks were softer and less forceful. Was he indeed acting inadvertently? Perhaps he was unable to resist. Then it hit him, an epiphany. Was he simply too hungry to stay still? If the cruel mother had neglected to feed him adequately, he would not have been shocked. The individuals surrounding them started whispering to each other. Even one woman talked too loudly without even minding Brenda's ears. "That woman's youngster is out of control. How humiliating." she murmured, setting off a chuckle among a few. Laura was prepared to finish this, waving her hand in front of Brenda's face. "If you don't control your child right now, I will call over a flight host," she said. Just then, a different passenger spoke up and said, "Lady, control your kid." He had been screaming the whole flight. The other passengers who'd had enough gave a murmur of agreement. And flight hostess emerged as a glimmer of hope just as things were about to go out of control. With an air of authority, she halted at Brenda's aisle and asked, "Do we have a problem here?" She walked over to the row and gave the youngster a sharp look. "Young man, you need to stop kicking the seat immediately." The flight hostess's order caused the child's stubbornness to waver. Reluctantly, he huffed and fell back into his seat, his legs at last still. Unable to question the airline employee's authority, Brenda reluctantly slumped into her seat, her resentment boiling under a surface of obedience. She was aware of her error. There was a collective sigh of relief throughout the cabin as the hostile environment gave way to a muted serenity. Due to his skin tone, this black man was asked to leave the establishment. It's difficult to believe what he did next. "Who allowed this repugnant being inside my shop?" Thompson growled. The shop turned, and everyone saw a black man at the counter who appeared to be illiterate. Simon turned to face the man who had just screamed, looking similarly shocked. Using the little pennies he had managed to gather the day before, he had strolled inside the store to buy himself a snack. One of the cheapest things the store had was bread, so that's what he planned to get. Simon looked confused as the manager, filled with rage, thundered at him. "Did you come here to steal something? You want to stir up problems and drive away consumers, correct?" A flash of anger lit up Thompson's irises as he screamed. With an angry shake of his head, Simon quickly flashed him the coin he was holding. He clarified that he didn't intend to cause any issue at all and had simply gone to purchase bread to eat. Thompson, though, was adamant. Insults were hurled in his direction, as he said that the only thing individuals who resembled him wanted was to steal and stir up trouble wherever they went. His expression disgusted as he hurled more racist epithets in Simon's direction. Simon scowled at that point. Although he was fully aware of his appearance, this man had no right to treat him so crudely. He was a sentient human being with emotions. In response, he told the man that he was wrong to use such words with him and that he was incredibly incorrect. He maintained that he was a fellow human being and that his desire to purchase a loaf of bread from the store did not constitute a transgression. Anger made Mr. Thompson's ears crimson. Simon was told to leave the store by him, gesturing to the security officer stationed at the door. "Get him out of my shop right now!" He spit out, "I don't want such trash in here." Simon found the man hard to believe. With a dejected gesture, he lifted his arms and declared he would go alone. But he did give Thompson a piece of his mind before he departed. He informed him that, despite his position of authority, he had no right to make snap judgments about individuals based only on how they looked. He emphasized to him that he should always be kind to others, as he may suddenly lose everything he held. The same individuals he had denigrated and degraded would be at his mercy when that occurred. He was ashamed and degraded as he left the business. He was starving and couldn't even find the bread he had come for. Before he knew it, he heard others sprinting after him from the store. Startled, he turned to find the manager and security guards right there. Simon was violently grabbed by the security guys, and before he could blink, they had held him down. They attacked him, beating and kicking him before he could say anything. They took the old bag he was carrying with force and threw its contents on the ground. "Have you taken the watch?" Thompson scoffed and said. "You disgusting thief, I knew you came into the store to steal." "I told you I just came in here to buy bread," Simon shot out aggressively. "Let me go. I didn't steal anything." Simon objected, but Thompson told the guards to inspect his suitcase extensively. A pricey wristwatch was among the things that fell out, along with a toothbrush, some socks, a napkin, a pack of cards, and a few articles of clothing. Everyone's eyes opened when they saw it. Simon looked at the watch in shock, wondering how it had gotten into his backpack. How did he get hold of it when it didn't belong to him? His gaze was confused as he looked about, attempting to interpret the circumstances. "There it is!" cried Thompson, pointing to the watch. "This man came to take something as I informed you. You'll be sorry you did this at all." Despite being homeless and impoverished, Simon refuted the charge, saying he would never consider stealing. He pleaded with them to trust him, telling them that he was innocent and that the watch in his suitcase had to have been dropped by someone in order to frame him. Thompson swiftly reported the robbery at the business to the police, thus his pleadings were ignored. Simon received a disgusted glare from him as he instructed the guards to pull him back to the store until the police could come. Simon insisted on his innocence and kept on appealing. Thompson gave the police an explanation of the circumstances upon their arrival, stressing how they had discovered the pricey watch in Simon's luggage. As Simon sobbed and pleaded not to be detained, an officer put handcuffs on his hands. Simon insisted that they were making a grave error and encouraged them to do a thorough inquiry. As Simon sobbed and begged the cops to stop, all that could be done was gaze at him. While some felt sorry for him, they could all see that the watch was in his luggage, which put him in a very awkward position. After Simon was pushed into the back of the squad car, they took off. Thompson's contented smile was visible to him. He was in shock at how unfortunate he had become for only wanting to purchase bread. His cell at the police station was designated as a holding area. He was asked by an officer if he wanted to phone his family or a lawyer. He gave a nod of his head. It was only Simon in the town. He thought back on his life throughout the previous year as he slept in the chilly cell that evening. It wasn't always that he was destitute. Actually, he had owned and operated a very prosperous little business in the town. Unfortunately, unanticipated events outside his control were the reason the firm collapsed, resulting in his homelessness. He began to regret walking into the store that evening since he was depressed. An enormous guy with a menacing visage approached him, one of his cellmates. He looked at Simon and then chuckled. Simon wondered what he wanted as he stared up at him. "What brought him to prison?" the guy questioned him. Simon explained to him that there was miscommunication. Remaining steadfast in his assertion, he recounted the events that occurred at the shop that night. Simon was told to give up hope that he would be released from prison soon by the guy, who laughed at him as if he were insane. He said stuff about his skin tone and how people of his kind tended to do things they were accused of most of the time. "You will not be believed by anyone. You certainly did it, though." "You appear to be a robber," he chuckled. Simon disputed this, assuring him he was innocent and that he was in error. "Never make hasty decisions about someone you don't know." Simon shouted, "That's not a smart thing to do." The man was wounded by his comments, which he took as an insult right away. "What are you trying to say? Do you intend to label me as an idiot with you and your kind?" The man abruptly reached down to seize Simon by the collar out of rage. Simon was startled by the abrupt movement and didn't realize what was happening until the man's fist struck his face. The big man began beating him viciously, pushing and kicking him. Simon was shouted at by him and he begged him not to offend him. A few minutes thereafter, the cell door opened and 2 policemen hurried inside to remove the guy from Simon. After assisting him in leaving the jail, a second officer examined his body for injuries. After a nurse attended to his wounds, he was washed up and dressed, and then an officer led him to another cell where he was kept overnight. Simon was astounded by how unlucky he had been in the last few hours. He'd been detained, assaulted twice, and charged with stealing. He considered his life to be a complete wreck. Simon was taken aback when a warden revealed that he was going to be released from his cell 2 days later. He went outside to see Thompson, the manager who had initially assigned him to the position. Thompson informed him that they had observed someone else placing the watch in Simon's bag when they examined the CCTV footage. Most likely, he wanted to return the watch to him at a later time. As he was being bailed out, the man added, "I decided to be kind enough to release you." The manager hurried over to Simon once he was released from jail, telling him not to ever show his face in the store again and expressing the hope that Simon had learnt his lesson. "It is unfortunate that the police did not accept your account. Are you aware of the reason since you're homeless and black?" he screamed. The manager questioned, "How did you feel staying in a cell for a crime you didn't commit?" Then he laughed callously and turned to go. Simon was at a loss for words with the callous management. He lacked the strength to protect himself either. All he did was stifle his emotions and turn to go. Many hours later, he was in his regular location, just a short distance from the shop. He was penniless and had scarcely eaten anything. He really wanted to take a shower and was famished. Above all, he yearned to spend hours lying on a cozy bed and dozing off. Simon was aware that those were just illusions. He quickly located the cover and dropped into the chilly ground. He was asleep in a matter of minutes, snoring softly. He slept for an hour, then all of a sudden got up and said, "I'm innocent. I'm not guilty. Give up beating me." His nightmare over the previous 3 days had been horrific, a reflection of his unpleasant experiences. Simon knew that trying to go back to sleep would just result in more nightmares, so there was no point. In addition, he was ravenously hungry, so he grabbed his suitcase and headed to where he usually begs. 30 minutes later, Simon was approached by Laura, a pleasant young woman who always made sure to place a few cents in his bowl and welcome him every time she passed. She saw the swell in his eyes, the melancholy emotion in him. Asking Simon why he was sitting in the glaring light, she knelt down. Simon broke down in tears, claiming that the agony in his heart burnt hotter than the sun. Then he started telling the story of what had occurred to him throughout the previous 2 days. He was upset with Thompson and said that justice needed to be done. He had an idea when he suddenly realized Laura was a journalist. He said he needed her assistance. In order to atone for the prejudice and humiliation he had experienced, he desired justice. He didn't want anyone to experience what he had. Journalist Laura had a track record of bringing attention to social injustice. Laura heard Simon's story, agreed that justice should be done, and promised to aid Simon. Simon informed her he already had a plan and thanked her. The idea was to let Simon enter the store so that the camera could record Thompson's actions toward him. They intended to make him public and demonstrate to everyone how he handled the underprivileged and black clients. Simon plucked up the guts to enter the shop once more. A covert camera was concealed in his jacket pocket. Asking to purchase bread, he headed to the counter. Thompson appeared shortly after he entered and yelled at him to leave the business. "I believe I forewarned you to avoid entering here once more. Would you rather live out the rest of your days behind bars? Have you not gotten the message yet?" He screamed out of rage. He approached Simon and took the bread he had bought from him. "We don't sell to black people who are homeless here." Then he bellowed, "Where is his dirty money?" at the attendant as he turned to face her. With shaking hands, the attendant gave him a few cents. Thompson took the coins from her, dashed in the direction of the door, and threw the coins out. "Go get your filthy money from over there," he shouted. "Now get out before I call the cops." Simon apologized for interfering with the store's business operations and assured Thompson he was going to depart on his own before Thompson could call the police. Simon grinned happily as he walked out of the shop, knowing that he had achieved his goal. Simon brought the camera over to Laura, and the two of them viewed the vile footage. They were pleased with the video and relieved that they had managed to defeat the man at last. Laura uploaded the footage to the internet as soon as she got home that evening. The video quickly became popular, with millions of views and interactions. Although the public's wrath and resentment toward Thompson and the business were evident, this was only the start of the events that would ultimately lead to Thompson's demise. The next day, Simon organized a neighborhood demonstration because he was committed to raising his voice against racism and injustice. And what do you know? Hundreds of others came to join him. They gathered and staged protests both inside and outside the store, calling for Simon and the other victims of Thompson's brutality to receive justice. They demanded that the business be the first to stop engaging in discriminatory activities within the neighborhood. Days passed during this demonstration, and many customers stopped coming to the business. The store owner was furious since they saw a big decline in sales and felt a lot of pressure from the public. He made the decision to look into Thompson internally. He was astonished to learn throughout the inquiry that there had been other complaints against Thompson in addition to the video showing the cruel treatment of Simon. Thompson was sacked by the owner right away. In addition, he publicly apologized to Simon and everyone else who had been subjected to unjust treatment by the management. As the owner of the company, he declared that his new objective was to put the welfare of his clients first and make sure that all employees received diversity and inclusion training. Everyone was pleased with the justice that was carried out, and the community applauded him for his prudent and morally correct behavior. Simon's prior status as a business owner was discovered throughout the examination. The business owner chose to provide an employment and housing offer to Simon because she felt guilty and responsible for him. He told him he was the ideal candidate for the position and extended an offer to take over as shop manager. Startled by the proposal, Simon gladly took it. Laura and the others who supported him were pleased for him and rejoiced in his new role. He took up residence in the business owner's temporary quarters. He shed a few tears as he surveyed the flat. Now that he was off the streets, he felt glad. He was committed to save enough cash to buy a property of his own and eventually launch a company. Simon had a strong work ethic and prior business expertise, making him a useful employee. The store owner saw an improvement in the business and was pleased with his hard work. Thompson had a shift of viewpoint while attending a human rights program that he was required to attend. He eventually realized that the folks he had previously detested were genuinely kind and didn't want any difficulty. He eventually realized his errors from the past and felt bad about his treatment of black people. He realized that morality was independent of race or social standing. Thompson stepped in and demanded to see Simon 6 months after he was dismissed from the store. Simon consented to speak with him even though everyone in the store was shocked to see him there. Thompson really apologized and conveyed his sorrow for putting Simon through so much stress and shame. Simon just gave him a hug and a grin. He informed Thompson that he was glad he had changed his mind and that he had already forgiven him. That was the beginning of two men's wonderful relationship. Over time, Simon, who was now thriving, was asked to speak at a significant community gathering, sharing his tale of overcoming homelessness and achieving stability. He urged the people to keep up the battle for justice and thanked them for their unflinching support. In addition, he expressed gratitude to Laura, the journalist who had been instrumental in restoring justice to the town. As he concluded his remarks, the audience applauded him. People approached him to offer their congratulations and commendation on his metamorphosis. A few expressed to him how his experience had inspired and affected them. After working hard for a few years, Simon was able to accumulate enough money to move into his own apartment. He also made the momentous choice to launch a company that would resemble the first one he had managed. After realizing his faults from the previous attempt, he operated the company with extreme caution and devotion. People in his neighborhood looked up to him as a role model, and everyone he encountered had nothing but good things to say about the diligent guy. Please remember to subscribe to our channel, give us a thumbs up, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our videos. If you enjoyed the tale, the next video that plays on your screen will probably move you too.